Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shiur.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is Shabbos Daf Kuf Chav Zayin. We have 5 lines from the top. Begins the Gemara Tanur Rabban, and we learned in a brisa. Now Mishnah taught us a chiddush that on Shabbos one may exert himself, do tircha for the sake of mitzvah. He can clear out his storage room to make some space for the orchim, the guests, or for people who need to come learn. So the tircha is allowed in a situation of mitzvah. Continues the brisa Tanur Rabbanan, a maschilin ba'itza tchila. One may not initiate on Shabbos, meaning he can't begin using this oitzer, clearing out the oitzer, if the storeroom had not been used before Shabbos. It's considered muktzah, it's not prepared, it's not muchan for Shabbos. So you can't move the content of the storeroom. Aval oiser by shvil, but he can form a pathway there, to allow him to get in and out if he needs to get through the oitzer. Says the Gemara, oiser by shvil, he can make a pathway there. You just told me that it's muktzah v'amris emaschilin. One cannot initiate. He can't begin the use of the storeroom on Shabbos. So how does he make a shvil, a pathway? Hachikamar. This is what the brisa means to say. Oiser by shvil beraglov. He can form a pathway using his feet. On his way in and out, he simply moves the items there with his feet. He moves them away, and this way he clears for himself a pathway. Now the Mishnah Berurah, actually based on this Gemara, teaches us that one may move muktzah using his feet. It's considered to be indirect use of muktzah, and it's mutter. Continues the Gemara, Tanur Rabbanan, tvua tzvura, piled up tvua. Bizman shehischel b'erev Shabbos, when he has already begun using it on erev Shabbos, he started feeding his animals from this pile, then it's considered to be prepared for Shabbos. Mutter l'stafkim mimeno b'Shabbos, then he can continue using it on Shabbos and feed his animals. V'im lav, but if he's initiating its use on Shabbos, hadn't yet been used beforehand, asur l'stafkim mimeno b'Shabbos, one may not make use of the content of this pile on Shabbos. Divrei Rab Shimon, these are the words of Rab Shimon, that something which is unprepared is considered muktzah. Rabacha Matir, he allows use of the tvu, even though it had not yet been prepared for Shabbos, hadn't yet been used before Shabbos. It's piled up, it's stored away, it's set aside, it wasn't prepared for Shabbos. Says the Gemara, Klapi Laya. In which direction are we going here? Meaning, it was Reb Shimon who generally does not subscribe to this broad application of muktzah, as we discussed yesterday. It's Reb Yehuda who holds that something needs to be prepared for Shabbos to allow its use on Shabbos. Whereas Reb Shimon says, Hachana is not necessary, as long as it's not negated from Shabbos use, as long as it's not inherently useless for Shabbos, for instance, a rock, a pebble, or the tevel, something which is asur b'achila. So why over here does Reb Shimon say that one may not use something which was not prepared? Ella, rather, Ema say, Divrei Reb Acha. It's Reb Acha who actually holds that it's asur, because he subscribes to this concept of muktzah, that unless it was inaugurated before Shabbos, it is not considered to be prepared for Shabbos, and one cannot use it on Shabbos. Reb Shimon Matir, Reb Shimon indeed allows, because he doesn't hold of this broad application of muktzah, even something which wasn't actually prepared, or something which wasn't initiated, its use wasn't initiated before Shabbos, and it's lacking that preparedness, it's still mutter. Continues the Gemara Tana, we learned in the brisa, Kama shiur tvua tzvura. What is the shiur? What is the amount of the stack of tvua, which is regarded as muktzah, something which is put aside for storage, not for personal use? Lesech is a half a kur. Rashi says 15 sa'ah. So once we have this large pile, we assume that it's something which is set aside. It's stored. It's not there for personal use. It's such a large amount. It's not considered to be prepared for current use. Boimine, Rav Nechumi bar Zachariah me Abaye. So you asked Abaye, shiur tvua tzvur bekama. The same concept. What is the shiur? What is considered to be a stack of tvua, a pile of tvua, which we are concerned about muktzah? Amar le Hari Amru, haven't they said? Hari Amru, they said shiur tvua b'tzvura b'lesech. The shiur of a tvua tzvura is indeed a lesech, which is 15. So as we just mentioned from the brisa. Iboilu, says the Gemara, they asked the Shaila. Let's go back to the Mishnah, which told us that one can clear afilu arba v'chomesh kupay shel teven. The Mishnah told us he can clear even 4 or 5 of these baskets of teven from the room there, from the storeroom, to make room for his orchim to make room for the people to come learn. Says the Gemara, hani arba v'chamish kupis de ka'amar. Those 4 or 5 that was stated. Now, Rashi explains that we're speaking specifically according to the opinion, the interpretation of Rav Chizda. If you recall, we had yesterday machlokes between Rav Chizda, who told us that the most he can clear out is 5 baskets worth. Whereas Shmuel says, it's unlimited. Whatever you need, as much room, as much space as needed, that's how much content you can clear out. So there's no limit, according to Shmuel. So that's the Gemara. Now, according to Rav Chizda, who gave us a limit of 5, so you interpret the Mishnah literally. You can clear out 4 or 5, but maximum 5. What does he mean? Hani arba v'chamish kupes de ka'amar. Those 4 and 5 that the Mishnah told us, ba'arba v'chamish kupes in, is it strictly if he carries it out in this manner, 4 or 5 baskets, meaning he can only make maximum of 5 trips, tfeiloi, but more trips he can't. He can't do it in smaller shifts. He can't downgrade the size of his load. We learned from Taisus yesterday that a kupa contains 3 sa'ah. So perhaps if you'd like to carry smaller size loads and do it in many shifts, can he do that? Or no, he needs to do it strictly in the most in 5 shifts. So again, hani arba v'chamish kubes de ka'amar ba'arba v'chamish kubes in can only be done in that manner. Only 4 or 5 transports, tfeiloi, but more not. Alma apparently l'mu'ti bilucha adif. It is preferred to minimize your walking. Don't make it so visible. Don't do too many transports, too many shifts. Take those 4 or 5 baskets and transfer them outside. Don't make it so visible. Don't make it into a whole operation. So even though he's going to be carrying a smaller size load, if he wants to chop down those kupos, take only half at a time, and instead of 5, do it in 5 trips, do it in 10 trips, which involves less exertion on a single time basis, a smaller load. No, we say l'mu'te bihilucha adif, to minimize your walking, to minimize the visibility, perhaps, is actually superior, and therefore he is limited to 5 trips. Oidilmo, perhaps, l'mu'te masi adif. If he prefers downscaling the size of those loads and doing more trips, doing it in smaller sizes and more shifts, perhaps that's also beneficial. There's an advantage to that as well, and therefore you can do that if you'd like to. So that's the shayla of the Gemara. Let's take a look at Rashi who explains this. Rashi here is 13 lines from the top, beginning with the words bedalad vehe kupos in tfeiloi. So this is one side of the Gemara that we are very specific. You can only carry out 4 or 5. That's it. Only 4 or 5 trips. Bekupos atzman hu yifane. He will carry out the hay, the produce inside those baskets. V'yimalem im yirtze, and I'll fill them up if you'd like to. Oisak. B'kseifoy. Alternatively, you can fill up a sack and sling it over his shoulder. Shiur kupa b'hamechas. And each trip will contain the shiur, which goes into a kupa, as we said, is 3 sa'ah. But to travel more than 5 times, to make more than 5 shifts, for instance, if you'd like to clear out using smaller containers, thereby increasing his hiluch, doing it in more shifts, that's not allowed. Because being a mite, the walking is actually preferred. Even though it involves increasing the size of the load, because perhaps the reason is because it's less visible. Just do it quickly, 4 or 5 shifts, and get it over with. Or perhaps there is an advantage, there's a benefit to decreasing the size of the load. If it prefers clearing out using smaller containers, which will total, of course, the total amount, which goes into the standard 5 baskets, which is the 15 sa'ah, but it'll break it down incrementally. He'll take it out bit by bit. Mutter, he can do so. And Rashi concludes, Rav Chizda kabayla. This question is strictly related to Rav Chizda, the Amar Hey Dafka, because Rav Chizda is the one who stated for us that the shiur of 4 or 5 is exact, is specific. He's limited to a maximum of 5. So the question here is, does he need to do it in 5 trips specifically, or can he do it in many more trips and downgrade the size of the load? Continues the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Tashma, come and listen to the following raya. The Tani Chada, We have one brisa which says, Mefanan afilu arba v'chamesh kubais. One can clear even 4 or 5 basketfuls of shel kadesh shemen, shel kadesh yain, these containers of wine. Shemen oil, kadesh yain is of wine. So you can fill 4 or 5 containers of these boxes of these kadesh shemen, kadesh yain. V'tanya, we have another brisa which seems to contradict this. It gives us a different shiur. Be'eser u'b'chamesh esrei. And the Gemara at this point figures we're speaking about 10 or 15 kupais, these baskets. So there's a contradiction. Is it 5 or is it 10, 15? My lav b'hakim. Says the Gemara that apparently, so Rashi explains that the Gemara at this point, I apologize, Rashi explains that the Gemara at this point figures that 10 or 15 here is referring to small size baskets. So the first brisa which tells us 4 or 5 is speaking about the large size baskets, whereas the second brisa which gives us a number of 10, 15 is referring to small size baskets. And indeed, this is the point of contention between two brises. Does one need to insist on doing it in 5 trips, or does he have the prerogative to do it in more shifts, downgrade the size of his load, and do it in 10 or 15 transports? My lav, do we not say b'haka miflagi? This is the point of the machlekes. The mar savar mi'uta bi'lucha adif, that the first brisa which insists on the number 4 or 5, you must fit all those kadeh yain, kadeh shemen into the 4 or 5, is speaking about, it holds that mi'uta bi'lucha adif, minimizing his walk, minimizing the visibility, the ruckus, the activity is preferred, and therefore we limit him to 4 or 5 trips. Umar savar, the other brisa which gives us a number of 10 or 15, holds savar mi'uta b'ma'asadif. We're speaking about small size baskets, in which he places those containers of wine and oil, and therefore he's doing it in 10 or 15 shifts because they're smaller size baskets. So the total number of total amount of content that he's going to clear, of course, equals the same. It's all of 15 sa, but he's going to do it incrementally, bit by bit. He's going to do it in 10 or 15 shifts using smaller baskets. So apparently this is the machlekes. Our question hinges on these two brises. No, the kuliyama all agree mi'uta belucha adif. It is preferred to minimize your walking. Do it in 4 or 5 trips, and that's it. Umi savris be'eser b'chamesh esrei akubis koi. Do you really hold that the second brisa, which describes him carrying 10 or 15, is referring to 10 or 15 baskets? Akubis koi? No, akadin koi. The brisa is referring to those containers, those jugs of oil and wine. And the brisa is telling you that he's going to go ahead and carry 10 or 15 containers, 10 or 15 kadin in those 4 or 5 baskets, large baskets. We're speaking about small size kadin. Says Malay Kasha, it's not difficult. There's no stira, there's no contradiction between the brisa which gives us the number 4 or 5, which is speaking about the kadin, 4 or 5 kadin which have actually 4 or 5 baskets, which only have large containers within them. Meaning, we're speaking about a kad of wine or oil, which is large, in which only one of these kadin will fit into a large basket. So the brisa which says 4 or 5 is speaking about transporting merely 1 kad per basket. When the brisa speaks about 4 or 5 baskets, he's speaking about transporting large containers of oil and wine, in which only one will fit into a kupa. Only one is transported per basket. In contrast to the other brisa, which discusses 10 or 15, the brisa is speaking about small size containers. The brisa which says 10 is speaking about transporting two smaller size, medium size containers in each basket. So you have 5 baskets, which will equal 10 containers, 2 per basket. The number 15, how do we get to that? The Mishtakli, Tlasa Tlasa. We're speaking of very small size kadin, very small size containers, in which 3 are carried at a time. 3 will fit into one basket. What are those types of kadin? B'dekure, the harpanya, these small size kadim of harpanya. So, according to the Gemara now, the conclusion is that one cannot do more than 5 shifts. It is better, it's preferred to minimize your walking, to minimize visibility, to minimize activity when it comes to carrying stuff on Shabbos. So at most he can do is 5 shifts. The Brisa which says 4 or 5 is good. We're speaking about he's transporting these large size kad of oil or wine in which only 1 will fit in per basket. So he's carrying 4 or 5 of these large baskets with 1 kad in each. When the Brisa tells us 10 or 15, it's speaking about different sizes. 10 is referring to the medium-sized container in which 2 will fit in per basket. So 5 trips, 5 of those baskets will equal 10 medium containers. Whereas the number 15 is referring to very small size containers in which 3 of them will fit into each basket. So 5 large baskets will total 15 containers. Continues the Gemara another question. So they asked the question again. This is directed at Rav Chizda, who gave us a shiur of a maximum of 5. 5 of these kupos, 5 of these baskets can be cleared out. Those 4 or 5 that were said, even if he has a great number of guests and he really needs to clear a greater area, no, we limit him at a maximum of 5. Or perhaps it's all dependent on his need, on how many guests arrive. Now if you'll say that, even according to Rav Chizda, this number 4 or 5 is a standard allowance for 1 person. But if more people arrive, then you can add more. You can clear even more according to need. So if that's the case, if you'll say, all depends on the need. Now the question is, can 1 person do the entire job? Or do we say, no, that's going too far, that's excessive exertion. And each person needs to clear for himself. 1 person can clear for everybody, or perhaps gavra mefane lenafshe. Each person needs to clear for himself. So indeed, we allow the total to grow. You don't need to stop at 5. You can clear as much as you need, but 1 person can only clear at a maximum of 5. Says the Gemara Tashma. Come and listen to the following right. The Omar Rab Chia, Pamachas halach Rebbe l'makom echad. There was a time that Rebbe went to this place, and he noticed that the place, indoors, was kind of tight. There wasn't enough room for the Talmidim to sit there. And he went out to the field. And he discovered a field full of bundles. Rebbe pushed away, cleared all the Aimrim, all the bundles from the entire field to make room for all the Talmidim. Now, the Mefarshim speak out, he didn't actually pile up those bundles. That would be considered a melach of ma'amar, so he cleared them out in a way which he didn't pile them up. He didn't gather them together, And Rashi points out that it was a Carmelis, it was an unfenced area, which is a Rishus Rabbanon. So how did he carry out those bundles? He did it in increments of less than 4 amas, which is only an Issa Rabbanon, as the Mefarshim speak out. There's a double Rabbanon here, because number 1, it's a Rishus Carmelis. Number 2, he's carrying less than 4 amas, so it's called a shvus de shvus, a double Rabbanon, which is mutter in a situation of a mitzvah. So he cleared out the entire field. For Rav Yosef Amar Rav Yoshia, Pamachas halach Rabbi Chia, he relates a different story where once Rabbi Chia went l'makom echad v'ro makom dochal l'talmidim, and he found that the place indoors was too crowded for the Talmidim, v'yatzal sada, so he went out to the field, u'matzah sada mleya oimrim, and he encountered a field full of bundles, v'imir Rab Chia kol sada kula, and he cleared out the entire field. Says the Gemara Shema Mino, we hear from here, hakol fi ha'orchen, that indeed one can go out and clear as much as is needed for the guests. We're not limited at the amount of 4 or 5 kupos, which equal 15 saw. As we see here, they clear out the entire field. So we concluded regarding the first question. Even according to Rav Chizda, there's no limit of 5. That's the standard allowance for one person that shows up. But if many Orchim are there and more is needed, certainly can clear as much as he needs. But we still have that question regarding who is going to do the clearing. Chad Gavra, can one person clear out the entire area? Or perhaps each person needs to do it for himself. It's too much for one person to do. It's too much exertion. That much we don't allow. Tashma v'imei Rebbe. In this story, what does the Gemara tell us? V'imei Rebbe. Rebbe was the one who cleared the bundles. Apparently, he himself did it on behalf of all. According to your way of reasoning, Rebbe with an Avshei Imer, do you really think that Rebbe himself did the clearing? Rashi says Rebbe was a Nasi. It wasn't covered for the Nasi to do that. You can't say that he himself personally did it. Ella rather Tziva Imer. So he instructed that it be done, that it be cleared. Certainly kol chad v'chad mefanin nafshei. Certainly what happened really was that each person did it on his own. He did it for his own need, but it wasn't Rebbe who cleared it for all. So, in summary, we learned about the halacha of clearing out mefanin mipnei orchim on account of guests, on account of a mitzvah. We discussed beginning the clearing process from an oitza which was never used before Shabbos. According to Rabbi Acha, you can't do that, it's muktzah. According to Rabbi Shimon, it's mutter. We learned that even a stack of tfu, which is not in a storeroom, can be muktzah if it's a large size stack which has 15 saw. That's not considered to be prepared for personal use. It's considered to be prepared for storage and is muktzah according to Rabbi Acha. Now we had two questions in the Gemara, specifically directed at Rav Chizda, who gave us a maximum of 5 kupos. So the Gemara told us, well, can he do it in many trips, or does he strictly need to do it in 5 trips? Says the Gemara, no, we are limited. He cannot add, he cannot increase his activity. He needs to do it in 5 shifts at the most. He cannot go ahead and break down the size of his load and do many transports. The Gemara asked, well, according to Rav Chizda, if there are many guests present and he needs more than 5 kupos cleared, can he do so? Says the Gemara, yes. We have a raya from those stories of Rebbe and Reb Chia that there's a need to clear more. Certainly, he's allowed to hakoil fi ha'orchim. What about one person doing the whole job? The Gemara did not conclude. Now Rashi points out that this whole discussion now Gemara only pertains to the Shita of Rav Chizda, who told us generally one can only carry out 4 or 5 baskets. There's a tircha involved. The Chum provided a special exemption when it comes to a mitzvah, but they gave us specific guidelines, 4 or 5 baskets. And therefore the Gemara concludes that you can only do it in 4 or 5 trips, because the limitation doesn't only pertain to the total content amount, but also to the manner in which he's carrying them out. He can only do it in 4 or 5 trips and no more. Likewise, the Gemara is uncertain whether, when there is a need for carrying out a large amount for all the guests, can it be done by one person or perhaps not? Because it's excessive tircha. It does not fit the guidelines. It doesn't conform with the guidelines of that exemption provided by the Chachamim. As opposed to the Shita of Shmuel, who says it's unlimited. There's no limitation. Whatever you need for your guests, you may do. You may clear it as much as you need. So certainly there are no specifications. You could do as many trips as you need. One person could do the entire job, because it's not a specific guideline they need to conform to. Whatever you're doing is for the sake of your guests, for the sake of mitzvah. So the allowance here is because you're doing it for the sake of mitzvah. We don't view it simply as a transporting items from one place to the next. You're clearing out for the mitzvah, for the tzorech, for the shimush of your guests, for the people who come to learn. So certainly there are no guidelines here, there are no restrictions, and do it in any manner in which you see fit. Continues the Gemara. The Mishnah says you can clear out for the sake of guests, for the sake of learning. Hachnasas orchim is great. It is equated to getting up to learn. Why? Because the Mishnah says the Mishnah seems to equate orchim and learning Torah. So we see that hachnasas orchim is as great as Talmud Torah. Rav Divim Rado Amar actually yoser. We find that now Mishnah hachnasas orchim is even greater than learning. Because the Mishnah precedes one over the other. And then so in the sequence of the Mishnah we see that the Mishnah placed hachnasas orchim prior to Beis HaMedrash, so we see it's a greater mitzvah. So apparently it means to say that if you have one area which you can provide either for guests or for learning, hachnasas orchim takes precedence. Continues the Gemara, Amar Bidamara, Gedoyle Achnasas Archim. Achnasachim is greater me'akbalas pnei Shechina, from receiving the Shechina. The Chsiv, as it says by Avram Avinu, Vayomer, Avram turned to Hashem and said, Hashem, Im no masas yechein beinecha. If I find favor in your eyes, Al notavim araglecha. Don't leave, please. Meaning, I have to go attend to my guests, those malachim that came. So we see that Achnasas Archim is greater than Kabbalah of pnei Shechina. Amar Abulazar, Boyrei, come take a look. Shaloi kimidas HaKadosh Baruch Hu midas basar adam. The conduct, the midah of Hashem is unlike the midah, the characteristic of a basar adam, a human being. How do we find that? Midas basar adam. When it comes to human behavior, ein katan yachalei melagadol. A katan cannot possibly turn to a greater person and tell him, "Hamten, wait around until I return to you." It's not respectful. However, when it comes to Hashem, it says, Avram told Hashem, please wait around until I tend to my guests, and will return. There are six things, six mitzvahs, which are very special. That one derives peres. He derives incidental benefit, like picking fruits from a tree. He gets reward. Somewhat of a reward in this world. And nevertheless, the keren, the principle, will still remain intact. He will not lose, it will not diminish from his schar. So he gets double reward. And these are the six things. Visiting sick, concentrating during davening, going to learn, one who raises his children for Torah. One who judges his friend favorably. So these are six mitzvahs, which a person earns reward even in this world, but it doesn't deduct from his eternal schar l'haba. Says the Gemara, is that the case? We have learned in the Mishnah, in Maseches Peah, Elu dvarim. These four things, which a person does, he reaps their fruit in this world, and the principle remains intact. The principle schar remains intact. What are these four things? Bringing peace between one and his friend. Torah is equated with all the mitzvahs. Torah is the greatest mitzvah. So we see from here, strictly these four have this advantage of double pay. But other things not. So how can Rabbi Yechon tell us? How can Rabbi Yechon give us a list of six things? Says the Gemara, Hani Nami. These as well, meaning those six Rabbi Yechon mentioned, Bahani Shaichi, are very much related to these mentioned in the Mishnah. Explains Rashi. Rashi up on top of the Amud, Hani Nami, Bahani Shaichi. Says Rashi, Achnosas Urchim Ubikecholim, Hainug Milas Chasadim. So let's go back to Rabbi Yechon's list. He mentioned Achnosas Urchim, Ubikecholim. Says Rashi, that's included in Gemilas Chasadim, which is mentioned in the Mishnah. V'iyun Tefillah, that's the third item mentioned in Rabbi Yechon's list. That's also Chesed. Hainu B'chlal Gemilas Chasadim. Why? The Chesiv Goyim al Nafshi Ish Chesed. It's referring to davening. So a person actually grants Chesed to himself. He purifies his nefesh, his heart. He asks for his needs. He asks for other people's needs. So he's engaged in an act of Chesed when he davens. So that's also included in Chesed. So far there's no contradiction, because those three are included in Gemilas Chasadim, which is mentioned in the Mishnah and Peah. Now, Hashkama is Beis HaMidrash v'gidol panam l'Talmud Torah. So those additional things mentioned in Rabbi Yechon's list, number 4 and 5, those things, Hainu Talmud Torah, that is Talmud Torah mentioned in the Mishnah and Peah. Finally, the sixth item on the list of Rabbi Yechon is Donis Chaver Kav Schus, judging his friend favorably, B'chal Hava Shalom. That's included in Hava Shalom, bringing about peace, which is mentioned in the Mishnah. Why is that connected to peace? Due to the fact that he tilts him to schus, meaning he judges him favorably. He didn't really do any ill to me. He did it against his will. He had good intentions. So he judges him favorably. As a result of that, yesh shalom b'neim, that brings about peace between them. So that's considered to bringing peace. Rabbi Yochanan lefarsh lecha asa. So Rabbi Yochanan is merely coming to explain and elaborate the Bechlal Gimel the Masnisin. Isnu halach vav. That within those three mentioned in the Mishnah, which is Chesed, which is Torah, and Shalom, are also included these that he mentions. And certainly there's an additional one mentioned in the Mishnah, which is Kidav Aim, which Rabbi Yochanan doesn't discuss. Rabbi Yochanan Leipolig, certainly Rabbi Yochanan is not disagreeing with that. Rabbi Yochanan is simply coming to teach us that there are additional elements and facets to Chesed, to Torah, and to Shalom. Now, interesting that these specific things result in double pay, even in schar in this world, which is a chiddush, because generally schar is something eternal, unlimited, which can't really be encapsulated in this world, a very limited world. So how is that a person will reap somewhat of a reward even in this world? So I heard from Rabbi Tadros Miller from Gateshead, who explained based on the Rambam, that what's unique about these mitzvahs is that we're speaking about chesed, we're speaking about Torah. So the mitzvahs, which are bein adam lachaver, chesed, and kibbutz aim, these things are between one and his fellow friend, his fellow man. These mitzvahs are unique in the sense that aside from their eternal spiritual entity, like any other mitzvah, like shaking lulav, they have an additional element, because you're providing for another person's physical needs, material needs. It's this worldly experience. Therefore, that results in receiving, in addition to your eternal spiritual reward, which is unlimited and eternal, you also get, you reap its fruit. You get somewhat of a limited reward in this world as well because of that aspect. Because this mitzvah carries two elements. It has that spiritual element, but also has this worldly, that physical, material element. You're providing physical needs. It's engaging between a person and the next. It's a physical engagement. Therefore, he is zoicha to schar even in this world. And certainly when it comes to Talmud Torah, which is all-encompassing, permeates this world, the next world, certainly when it comes to Talmud Torah, he gets eternal reward as well as the fruit in this world. Continues the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanon, Hadon Chaver Kafschos, one indeed judges his friend favorably. What is he zoicha to? Zdonen oisei l'schos. From heaven, from Shemayim, they will judge him favorably as well. Now what's the pshat in this? We apply the term of midah keneged midah. A person who conducts himself in a certain manner, he earns a parallel hanhaga from Shemayim. They treat him similarly. And just as he is dalek havschus, he will be zoicha likewise from heaven. They will view him favorably. Now what does it mean to be dalek havschus? So we know there are midas of din, which is black and white. Do as you must do, follow the rules, the letter of the law, black and white, open and shut case. That's midas hadin. Then there's midas chesed, kindness, midas harachma, mercy. So if one chooses to view his friend in that manner, well, like Rashi says, he didn't mean it, he had good intentions, he didn't know. So he's using midas chesed, midas harachma to judge him favorably. He's putting him in a positive light. Likewise, he will be zoicha that from heaven they won't apply the midas hadin to him. Open and shut. You did something wrong. Punishment. Black and white. No, they'll take into consideration all different elements, all different factors, all different mitigating factors. The circumstance at hand, the family history, his true intentions at the time of the avera. Did he really want to do it? Was he full of regret? There are all kinds of factors that can be taken into consideration to put him into a positive light. So if a person conducts himself in that manner, likewise, he's zoicher that from heaven they view him in that manner as well. Says the Gemara, Masa, there was a story, Ba'adam Echad, a certain person, Sheyarad Megala Elyon, he descended from the upper Galilee in Eretz Yisrael, Niskar, and he hired himself out, Etil Ba'abayis Echad, by a certain homeowner, Bedarim, on the south side of Eretz Yisrael. Some have a girsa, they say this was actually Akiva ben Yosef, the great Rabbi Akiva. This was when he was still unlearned on Ma'aretz. And this was the sacher, this was the fellow who was the employee who hired himself out to work by this balabayis. So he worked for how long? Shalosh shanim, for 3 years. Erev Yom Kippur came around, he decided to leave. Amalai, so he turned to the employer, he told him, "Take this schari, please, my wages, please. Ve'elech va'azanes ishti banai. Let me have my wages so I can go provide for my wife and children." Amar Loi, so the employer told him, sorry, Ainli Mois, I have no money. He didn't expect him to show up every Yom Kippur. So he said, I have no money available. Amar Loi, so he told him, Tainli Peres, at least give me some produce. Amar Loi, Ainli, I don't have. Tainli Karka, give me some land. Ainli, I don't have. Tainli Behema, give me animals. Ainli, I don't have. Tainli Karmuk Sosas, give me some mattresses, some pillows, which he saw sitting in the house. Ainli, I don't have. Hivshel Kelo V'Achoirav, so the employee was heartbroken. He took his kalim, his tools, slung it behind over his shoulders. V'alach lebeisai, departed. He went home. V'pachin nefesh, sad, depressed, empty-handed. La'achar regel. After Yom Tov, notav al abai schar b'yadai. So the homeowner, the employee, the boss, took this fellow's wages in his hand. V'imoi, and with him was masui gimel chamayrim, 3 donkey loads of filled with good things. Echad shomacha, 1 filled with food. Echad shomishta, 1 with drink. V'echad shomini megadim, 1 filled with delicacies. V'alach lebeisa, he traveled up to his fellow's home. After they finished their meal, they ate and they drank. Nosai schari, he gave him his wages. Amarlai, now the boss was curious. He said to him, when we had that conversation, what was going through your mind? When you turned to me and you told me, please give me my wages. And I said, I have no money available. What did you suspect me with? What was going through your mind? What were you thinking? Amarti, so the fellow told him, I figured Shema Parkimatia Bezoil, perhaps some cheap Parkimati merchandise. This damalach became available to you. Some lucrative business deal suddenly perked up. And you purchased the merchandise with that money. So you had no money available. Now, when you told me, this is the boss speaking, when you told me, Tainli behema, give me some animals, and I responded, Ainli behema, I have no animals available. What were you thinking then? So he said, Amarti, I was thinking, perhaps it's been rented out to others and it's not available. So the boss continued, but when you told me, Tainli karka, give me some land, and I responded to you, Ainli karka, I have no karka available. What did you suspect me with then? What were you thinking then? Amarti, so the fellow said, well, I was thinking, perhaps it's been leased out to others and it's unavailable to you. And the boss again saying, when I told you, Ainli pears, I have no produce. What were you thinking then? So the fellow responded, Amarti, I figured Shema Einan Musaris, perhaps the Maisa was not yet separated, therefore one may not eat it, and you didn't want to give it to me. The Mepharshim say that he was an Amaretz, he didn't want to trust the Amaretz, lest he go ahead and eat the produce, and there was no time available to take care of it. It was Erev Yom Kippur. So that's what I figured. When the boss is continuing, when I told you, I have no mattresses, I have no pillows, what were you thinking then? Amarti, I said, perhaps he gave away all his possessions to Shemayim, to heaven, and therefore none of them belongs to him. So the boss responded, I want you to know, you are 100% right. Ha'avoida, this is Lashon Shvua, the avoida, the service of Hashem. So he swore, Kachaya. That's exactly what was. What happened was, Hidarti kol nechasai, I made another vow that no one can have hana, can benefit from all my possessions. V'shvil Hurkanus b'ni, due to the fact that my son Hurkanus, Shelo Asak b'Torah, wasn't learning Torah, and therefore I didn't want him to benefit from my possessions, and I made a vow that nobody can have hana. So indeed what you said is true. The last point that you said was true, that everything was off limits. I made a nether, I gave it all away, and therefore it was unavailable to be used. And the end of the story was, when I approached my friends in the south, they released me from all my nedarim, and now I have access to my possessions, and here's your wages. Va'ata, and this is the boss speaking. He says, you, just as you have judged me favorably, likewise you should be zoicha, Hashem should judge you favorably. Tana Rabbanan, we learned another story in a Braisa, Masa b'chassid echad. There was a story with a specific chassid. Rashi says, whenever we say chassid echad, it's either Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava or Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Loi. So what happened? So this chassid shepada riba achas bas Yisrael. So he went and he redeemed Riva. Rashi says Riva is a Nara, a young girl, a Jewish girl. He redeemed her from the Goyim, and he brought her back. Ulam when they stayed overnight, it was time to go to sleep. What did he do? Yishkiva tachas magaloisav. So he was with his Talmidim, and he laid her to rest, to sleep, near his feet. L'machar, on the following day, Yorad. So the chassid went down v'tovel, and he immersed in the mikvah, v'shanal talmidav, and he taught Torah to his Talmidim. Now he approached them and he asked them as follows. V'amalem, he told them, when I placed her near my feet, what did you suspect me with? Do you think that I was going to do something wrong with her? So they responded, no. Amarnu, they said, we figured, Shema yesh banu, Talmud she'ene badak l'Rebbe. Perhaps amongst us, there's a Talmud whose character has not yet been verified and established to Rebbe, and therefore you're not comfortable leaving her amongst us. Therefore, you place her in a secure location. So that's how we justified your actions. He continued asking them, what about when I went to the mikveh? What did you suspect me with then? What were you thinking then? Did you think perhaps that I did something wrong overnight with that girl which required tefillah? So they said, no. Amarnu, we said, perhaps as a result of the exertion of the trip, Ira Keri Rebbe, perhaps Rebbe became tummy at an emission, and therefore needs to go to the mikveh. Amarlem, so he responded to them, Ha'avoida, again is Lashon of Shvuah, Kachaya, exactly as you describe, that's exactly what took place. Va'atem and you, Kashem Shedan Tuni L'Kavschus, just as you have judged me favorably, Hamokoim, Hashem, Yod and Eschem L'Kavschus, should do likewise to you. Toner Rabbanan, we have a third story. Pamachas, there was a time, Hutzrucht over Echad, the Talmidei Chacham had a need to have a certain discussion, an important discussion, Eitzel Matronusa Achas, by this specific noblewoman who had good connections. Shekol G'doilei Roimim Mitzuin Esla, who all the prominent of the Romans, who he found by her, they interacted with her, and she had good connections with the upper echelons of the Romans, of the government, of the authorities. So the Talmidei Chachamim, they need to discuss something important with her, perhaps to get her to help them. So they need to approach this Roman noblewoman. Amru, they said, Mi Yelech, who's going to go approach her? Amru, Rabbi Shua, Ani Yelech, I'll go. He volunteered. Halach Rabbi Shua Talmidav. So Rabbi Shua went with his Talmidim. Kiven she'egiel Pesach Beisa. When he arrived at the entranceway of her home, Cholatz Tfilav, he removed his tefillin, Berochek Arba Amis, at a distance of 4 amas, from the entranceway, V'nichnas, and he entered, V'naladas V'fneim, and he closed the door before them. After he emerged, Yorad, he went down v'tovel, and he was tovel v'shana talmidav, and he taught Torah to his talmidav. V'amar lem, and he asked them, when I removed my tefillin, what were you thinking? Were you thinking perhaps that I was going to do something wrong? Amar, they said, no, we figured, because Sava Rebbe figures, Rebbe holds, something which is holy, tefillin, should not enter a place of tumah, therefore you removed it prior to entry. So he continued to ask him, when I closed that door, what were you thinking then? Amarnu, we figured, Malchus, perhaps a word of connected to the authority, to the Malchus. Yesh Beinah is going to be discussed between him and her, which requires privacy and discretion. That's why he closed the door. So he continued to ask him, when I went down to be toivel, what were you thinking then? Did you think perhaps I did something wrong, which required tefillah? So he said, no, Amarnu. We figured, we said, Shema, perhaps, Nitiza Tzinoira Mipia. Tzinoira is a little bit of spit shot out from the mouth of this guy, of this Gentile woman, Al Godov Shal Rebbe, on the clothing of Rebbe, and required tefillah. As Rashi brings that the Chachamim consider the goyim as tmeim, and therefore you need to be toivel. Amalem, so he responded, Ha'avoida, I swear, Kachaya, indeed, the way you say, that's exactly what was. Va'atem and you, Kashem shedan tuni l'schus, just as you would dan l'kavschus, Ha'makam yod and eschem l'kavschus, Hashem as well should always judge you favorably. Continues the Gemara. The Mishnah told us one may clear out, for the sake of urchin, for the sake of learning, can clear out truma tahira. So we're discussing things which are not muktzah. Says the Gemara, Efana Truma Torah. Pshita, of course, it's obvious. Why would you think otherwise? Truma Torah is not muktzah. It's perfectly edible. So it's more like tzricha. The Mishnah only needs to say this halacha. It is only needed in the case of the mancha biyad Yisrael, that this truma is in the possession of Yisrael who can't personally eat it. It's asur. Ma'al perhaps we shall say, since it's not suitable for him, asur is considered to be muktzah and he cannot move it. Kamashma. No, the Mishnah teaches us, given the chazal kohen shaper dami, since it's suitable for the kohen, therefore even the Yisrael can go ahead and move it. There's nothing inherently wrong with this food. It's perfectly edible. There's an isser for the Yisrael. He's prevented from eating it on account of isser. So the actual object is perfectly fine, and therefore it's not muktzah. Continues the Mishnah Udumai. This is produce brought from Ha'aretz, in which there's an uncertainty as to its status, whether or not the Ha'aretz has separated the trumas and ma'aser properly. Now, ordinary person may not eat Dumai until he addresses the truma and ma'aser concern. So how can he move the Dumai? Dumai halei chazile. He cannot eat it. It should be muktzah. Says the Markivan the boy, since if he wishes, mafkir le'nechse, he simply is mafkir his possessions. He renders his possessions ownerless. V'aba ani, thereby turning into a pauper. V'chazile, when he's an ani, this Dumai is suitable for him. We're going to learn soon that an ani may eat Dumai. So since theoretically it's suitable for him, he has that potential. Hashtanami chazile. Now as well we regard this as being suitable for him because it has that potential. The snan, as we learned, ma'achilin esaniyim Dumai. We feed poor people Dumai. V'esachsanya Dumai. Achsanya are those Jewish troops which are making their rounds and need to be supported by the members of the community. We may feed them Dumai. Rashi explains because since they're making their rounds and they're dependent on Ha'aretz as well for their sustenance, therefore the Chachamim granted them a leniency. The Aniyim, the Achsanya, they may eat from Ha'aretz without concern. V'amar Avchuna, Tana, we learned in the Brayso, B'shama imim ein machilan. Es Aniyim D'mai, one may not feed Aniyim D'mai, V'es Achsanya D'mai. V'sil I mean, yes, we could, machilan Aniyim D'mai, we can feed the Aniyim D'mai, V'es Achsanya D'mai. So indeed, our Mishnah follows V'sil. Since it can be fed to an ani, and he theoretically can become an ani, so there's nothing inherently wrong with this object. It's still potentially suitable for him, and therefore it's not muktzah. Continues the Mishnah, Ma'aser Rishon Shel. So this can be moved on Shabbos. Pshita, it's obvious. If it's perfectly edible, it's mutter. Why can't it be moved on Shabbos? Says Zimra Leitzricha, apparently we're speaking about a case, Shigdimoy B'Shibol. Let's make a small introduction here. So we have the pile of produce piled up, smoothed out, considered to be dagan, considered to be grain, and it's chayiv in trumas and maasros. Now the first thing one is meant to separate the truma gedola, which goes to the kohen. Then comes ma'aser rishon, a tenth, which goes to the Levi. Now the Levi himself has an obligation to remove a tenth of that which is given to him, a tenth of that ma'aser rishon. He removes a tenth, separates trumas ma'aser, it's called, and gives that to the kohen. So the Gemara here at this point figures, we're speaking about perfectly edible ma'aser rishon, in which everything was done properly. First, the Truma Gedola was taken off from the grain, given to the Kohen. Then came the Ma'aser Rishon, given to the Levi. And then the Levi took from that Ma'aser Rishon and separated for the Kohen. Says the Gemara, if so, it's Pashat, that it's not Muktzah, Pshita. Lo Yitzricha, apparently we're speaking about Sheikdimi B'Shibol. Something went wrong. The Yisrael was Makdim. He proceeded. He began by separating the Ma'aser Rishon when the produce was still B'Shibolim in its stalk form. In which case, there's no obligation yet. And there was no chiyuv of Truma Gedola, so he had not yet separated Truma Gedola. But he went ahead and quickly gave something to the Levi. So Levi took his portion, which was given to him by the Yisrael, these stalks, and he removed the Trumas Meiser, a tenth of that, gave it to the Kohen. So Nitla Himenu Trumas Meiser, that portion was separated from the Meiser Rishon, but there was never Truma Gedola separated from this Meiser Rishon. So this is a Ma'aser Rishon which only has a partial Truma removed from it. The Trumas Ma'aser was done properly, but there was never Truma Gedola done because the Yisrael gave it to the Levi prior to the Truma Gedola ever having been separated from the crop. Nevertheless, it's edible, it's mutter. And that is the Chiddush of the Mishnah. V'chiyah, the Amar Ravo, like Ravo said, Amar Shlakish, name of Shlakish. Ma'aser Rishon, Shekdimu B'Shibon, Ma'aser Rishon which the Yisrael preceded to separate it when it was still in stalk form, in which the Chiyuv of Truma Gedola has not yet arrived. Patur Truma Gedola, one need not separate Truma Gedola any longer from this Ma'aser Rishon. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, the pasuk is speaking about the Ma'aser Rishon which is given to the Levi. You must separate from it Trumas Hashem, Maser Min HaMaser, a tenth of that Maser, which goes to the Kohen. We learn from here, Maser Min HaMaser Martilach. You must remove a tenth of that Maser Rishon to the Kohen. But no more, V'loi Truma Gedoyla, U'Trumas Maser Min HaMaser. You don't need to, in addition to the Trumas Maser, remove also, separate the Truma Gedoyla. You don't need to do two things. You only need to separate the Trumas Maser. The Truma Gedoyla is not applicable in this case, since the Levi received it prior to the grain becoming obligated in Truma Gedoyla. If this is the case, let's say the Yisrael separated the Maser Rishon for the Levi, but not when it was in stalk form. When it was already bikri, it was already piled in a pile, and it was threshed properly, piled up, smoothed out, in which case there is a chiv of Truma Gedoyla. Let's say he ignored the Truma Gedoyla, which is meant to take off first. He ignored that. He separated the Maser Rishon, gave it to the Levi. Perhaps, even in this case, the Levi should be exempt from Truma Gedoyla because of this pasuk. Says the Gemara, Yachi, Afilu higdima b'kri nami lepater. There as well, he should be exempt from Truma Gedoyla. Amarle, so Abai responded, Alech amakra, on you the pasuk says, meaning to address this situation, the pasuk specifically obligates him. The pasuk says, Mikol matnei sechem tarimu. The Levi, Mikol matnei sechem, from all your gifts, you need to lift, you need to separate. The Torah is saying, yes, he needs to go ahead and separate Truma Gedoyla, which has not yet been separated from his Maser Rishon. Says Rav Papa back to Abaye, Umar Rois. How do you know? Meaning, there's one pasuk that exempts him, one pasuk that obligates him. How do you know what's what? Which one is going on the stalks? Which one's going on the pile of grain? Says Abaye, very simple. High idgan. When he received his portion from the Kri, which was already dogon, which already had a status of grain, then certainly he's high because the obligation of Truma Gedoyla was already present at that point. So you can't exempt himself from that. Therefore, it is logical to say that the pasuk that obligates him is speaking about such a specific case, where he received this portion, where the Levi received this portion from finished grain. In this case, the Torah obligates him to complete and to go ahead and give the Truma Gedoyla, since it was already a chiv prior to him receiving his portion. However, in the earlier case of the Shibolim V'hai Lo Yidgan, it wasn't yet considered grain. It wasn't dagan. They were merely stalks. At that point, there was no chiv of Truma Gedoyla present. So since he received his portion prior to the grain attaining the status of grain, prior to the chiv of Truma Gedoyla having arrived at all. So since he preempted the system, he went ahead and he received his portion prior to that stage. The Torah says he's exempt from Truma Gedoyla. Continues the Gemara. Maser Sheni, so you can move Maser Sheni on Shabbos, Maser Sheni or Hegdish, which were niftu redeemed. Says, well, Pshita, it's obvious, why not? Lo Yitzricha, apparently we're speaking about Shanos and Sakaren. He provided the Karen, meaning the principal amount, to redeem. But he had not yet completed the Chaimish, is the additional fifth, which he needs to add to complete the redemption process. The Mishnah is teaching us the additional Chaimish does not hold back the pidyon from taking place, and therefore it's considered to be suitable and not muktzah. V'atormus hayavish, this dry bean, which is suitable for goats, says more dafka yavish, specifically dry, avalach, but if it's fresh, loy, you cannot move it, it's considered to be useless and muktzah. My time away, even the murr, since this fresh turmeric is bitter, loy achla, the goat won't eat it. Okay, time for a brief review of today's daf. We learned about one who needs to clear out for the guests that arrived, for the learning of Torah. The Gemara discusses initiating maschilin ba'itzat chila, a storehouse which was not yet used before Shabbos. We have a discussion of whether or not it's muktzah. According to Rav Acha, it's muktzah. According to Rav Shimon, it's not muktzah. The Gemara told us a pile of wheat, which has a total amount of 15 sa, that is also considered to be stored away, considered to be off limits, and considered to be muktzah if it had not yet been used before Shabbos, according to the sheet that it holds muktzah. The Gemara told us that even according to Rav Chizda, who gives us a maximum of 5 baskets, which can be cleared, that's only with regard to one guest. But if he needs more, if more guests arrive and he needs more area, certainly he can clear as much as he needs. The Gemara tells us that when we speak about 4 or 5 baskets for the sake of one guest, He cannot be marbe behiluch. He can't decide to take smaller loads and make more shifts. He needs to carry that in 4 or 5 times, and that's it. The Gemara was uncertain regarding the large amount of guests, which allow him to clear out a larger area. Can that be done? Can that job be done by one person? Or does it need to be done individually, each person for himself? The Gemara told us the greatness of Achnasas Orchim. It's either equal or even greater than Torah. It's greater than Kabbalas HaShechina. The Gemara told us specific mitzvahs earn a person double reward. In this world and in the next world, Kibbud Avayim, Chesed, Shalom, Torah. He Zoichet Periseim L'Mazeh, and concluded with 3 remarkable stories about judging others favorably, which the Gemara tells us a person is Zoich, merits. That likewise, from Shamayim, they treat him and they put him in a positive light. They're done him, L'Kav Zchus.